Hello, everybody, and welcome to our Meet the School Committee Candidates Night. And my name is Julie Wu, and I'm president of the Belmont Pan-Asian Coalition. We are co-hosting tonight with the Belmont Chinese American Association. Michael Gao is here from the BCAA, and we have partnered together for the past 3 years to host these Meet the Candidate Nights. On Monday night, we had a very productive discussion with the select board and moderator candidates. And a lot of people have commented since then that it was really nice to see people interact in person because we've had a lot of video debates and Zoom events, but we haven't really had a chance to everybody be together with a live audience, and I think that makes a difference. So thank you very much for making the time. I know you are very busy, and we're going to be recording this, and we're going to post this also online with Belmont Media, so that'll be up for other people to see as well. So I wanted to introduce Dipali Trivedi. She is our moderator for tonight. She's on the board of directors for the Belmont Pan-Asian Coalition. So Dipali, if you want to start off.
Yeah, so I'm Dipali. And as I said, I have 2 kids in Belmont school system. My son is in high school and my daughter is in middle school. And of course, we have been through Winbrook, and so really very interested in like all the policies that you are thinking about and how you are looking at the your venture here. So I'll just start with introducing you guys. Angus is a 2022 Belmont High School graduate, lifelong Belmont resident, and town meeting member for Precinct 8. Megan is running for re-election to a second term to the school committee, and since her election in April 2021, she served as school committee secretary for 1 year and chair for 2 years. And Megan is also a town meeting member, and she served as Butler PTA president for 2 years prior to running for the school committee. And Matt is an associate professor of education and economics at Brown University, where he studies K-12 education policy. He's an active member of Burbank School Community, where his 2 children go to school, and is a long-term volunteer soccer coach at Belmont Soccer Association. So we'll start with opening remarks by each of you, and you will have 2 minutes, and Julie will keep track of that and give you indication when time is up, or
do a 30-second warning. Let's see, not 15 minutes, 2 minutes. Okay. Okay, so as soon as you start, I'll start the timer. So who's going first?
Ballot, alphabetical, whatever.
I'm happy to go first. I am Meg Moriarty, and I am running for re-election to the Belmont School Committee. I do have 2 children in the Belmont Public Schools. They are currently in 7th grade, so they're twins. So I am a parent, and I entrust the well-being and the safety and the nurturing of my kids to the Belmont Public Schools every day. So I certainly have some skin in the game there. My background is in education. I study best practices in implementation of programs, mostly in the STEM field or STEM programming for students in other districts and at the state level. So I have some idea of the challenges that are facing our educators today. I'm also an experienced member of the school committee. So I was elected in April of 2021. And as was stated, I have served as chair for the last 2 years. One thing that I've really learned over the past couple of years, and actually throughout my whole life, that has certainly applied to the school committee, is that relationships and teamwork really matter to getting things done. I think that over the past few years, I have certainly proved that I can work with my fellow school committee members, with other town officials, and with state legislature to get things done. So some of the things since I've been elected that I have gotten done is, one, when I was first elected, we were still coming out of COVID. So certainly negotiating with the union to get our students back into school and making sure that we had safe learning spaces for our students as well as our educators.
30-second warning, just a.
Oh, wow, that was 2 minutes?
1.5.
Oh, all right. Sorry, I was trying to fill 2 minutes there. As well as successfully negotiating 4-year contracts, securing one-time money, hiring and onboarding a new superintendent, and conducting substantial updates to our school committee policies. Another thing that I've done is to uplift student voices and make sure that we are aligned with Mass General Law and have 2 school students at all of our school committee members now. And I will tell you a little bit more later.
Sounds great.
I can go next. I'm Angus Abercrombie. I am a Precinct 8 town meeting member and a recent graduate of Belmont's Public Schools. I've lived in this town for my whole life. I went through our schools. I know what we're capable of, what we should have in our schools, and frankly, what we're missing and the impacts of that on a very clear and personal level. My commitment from Belmont Schools comes from the opportunities and experiences that I was afforded as a student. And from watching those get chipped away, things like moving foreign language, band education later in our curriculum, to having less resources for students to go on field trips, or simply, not having the same class sizes that we've seen for years and years. And I'm running for school committee to do the work to build back when it comes to finding new revenue, finding cost efficiency, and creating equitable policy in the Belmont Public Schools. My background is in policy, advocacy, and campaigning, finding common ground within a community, building buy-in, and getting policies through the very complex procedures that town and city governments can often harp. So I'm really running for school committee to do that work and bring a grounded perspective on the modern issues that our schools are facing to the conversations of the school committee.
Okay, well, I'm giving you guys 30-second warnings.
Okay, I mean, I don't know.
No, but if you're done, you're done.
You could finish mine for me.
Okay. Okay, well, we'll hear more for you. Okay, hold on. Let me try to see if I can
I've learned the value of brevity at town meeting.
Yeah, no, that's very good. If I can just figure out the value of my iPhone timer, really good. Okay, all right. Okay,
Good evening, everyone. My name is Matt Kraft. It's a pleasure to be here tonight with my fellow candidates and everyone here. I am a dad of 2 young kids who attend Belmont schools. I'm a volunteer soccer coach, excited to have the season start back up. I am a professor of education and economics, and I am thrilled to be a candidate for school committee. I'm running for school committee for 3 main reasons, because I've dedicated my entire career to helping to improve public education, and I see public education as a cornerstone to our democracy. I'm deeply committed to Belmont Public Schools because that's where my own 2 children attend, and it's the community that I love. And third, because I see a really exciting opportunity right now for us to move forward under new district leadership and to help bring forth the vision that we're developing of what we as a community want in our schools. I started out in my career as a tutor in college and just fell in love with education and teaching, that magical moment when you see an idea light up in a student's eyes. And since then, I've spent 20+ years working to improve public schools, and I want to put that experience to work for our town. I particularly am committed to building trust and transparency and making sure that we as a town represent all of our residents and that we provide students all the type of enriching experiences they deserve and meet them at their individual areas of need. I ask for your vote, and I admit I don't have all the answers, but I will always listen and I'm committed to working collaboratively to find the best solutions for our town. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your opening remarks. We'll start with our first question. And of course, override is on everyone's mind. And we discussed about that on Monday evening too. But if that doesn't go through, what are the actions that you will take, or what are the things you will do to mitigate that, so that it really doesn't affect our education system going forward?
So I'll take that one to start off. It will affect our education system moving forward if that override fails. And I get asked a lot of versions of this question, but the most important thing to say is that if the override does not pass, we will make cuts. The money is not there. We've found a combination of federal funds and other options to stave off most of the cuts in 2021 when the override failed. There were still cuts. And going into this override, we know that there is not another American Rescue Plan Act coming down the pipeline. So it will be worse. It will be devastating to students. Now, that said, there is a lot of work that we can do, especially over the long term, to mitigate the growth of costs in the district and to find new revenues. I'm particularly interested in the opportunities we have regarding some of the consolidation that we can do, the collaborations between the town and schools, things like in IT, where we have two departments that do similar jobs and pay for similar software, but one's for the town and one's for the schools. And if we can, ensure accurate and effective collaboration there may be cost savings, but that takes time and that takes, real work to maximize that saving. And again, it's small in comparison to the scale of the failed override. We also have options like looking for new revenue. I think a lot of our school spaces, especially the newer ones, could be enticing rental opportunities. And so putting that plan into action and making sure that we can find those revenues is going to be crucial. I think special education is a big issue on this area. And it's one that I know we all talk about, but making sure that we remain collaborative with the district administration to find ways to support students with special education needs in a way that is efficient and effective at meeting their needs.
Next.
Sure. I'm a strong supporter of the override, and that also means that every member of our town leadership and the school committee needs to be committed to making sure that we get the most out of every dollar we spend. If we ask our residents to step up and invest in our services, both on the school side and the municipal side, that we honor that investment to the fullest extent possible. Because knocking on doors, I hear over and over again that residents, particularly those on fixed income, are stretched thin. We've asked them and they've stepped up time and time again, now with debt exclusions for the high school and the library and the rink. And we're asking them to help us in a different way for our general operating budget so that we can build towards the long-term vision that we have for our schools. There's no doubt that those investments will pay off, particularly, as Angus mentioned, if we're able to build a more robust and high quality within district special education set of services so that we can keep our students here and reduce the out-of-district placement costs, tuition and transportation. By addressing those types of needs, we have the opportunity to move the district forward. But I'm also committed to being a school committee member who makes those difficult decisions. If the override does not pass and I'm called upon to serve, I'm ready to make cuts. Those won't be easy and they will be real, but we're going to have to find a way to make sure that they are distributed and are least painful, and that we do it in a way such that we don't make decisions that are with a short-term vision that are going to damage our long-term recovery possibilities.
Thank you for that. My next question is.
Oh, Meg, make it.
Yeah, so it feels like just a few months ago that I stood and I gave a speech at the opening of the new middle school. So it was the full opening of the brand new middle high school building, for which the school committee and the school district is just so thankful to the community for passing that debt exclusion overwhelmingly. And it certainly has filled a need for all of our students. We are now able to reconfigure the district, offer different opportunities for our students that because of lack of space, we weren't able to, as well as really modernize the education at the middle school and high school level in the new building that we have. When we opened that building, though, one of the things I said was that, the building is a building, right? And it's really what happens inside of that building that impacts our students. And that is primarily our educators. And that is the largest part of our budget. So yes, I'm a huge supporter of the override, and it really worries me that if the override doesn't pass and we have to make reductions to our staffing model, that we have made investments that now we will not be able to see fully through in terms of the building and the reconfiguration. And so I see the need for it, and I think that it will really help us bring a full vision. With new district leadership, we have already started to think about how some of that reconfiguration work can happen in a way that making investments now in early educational literacy and math that we haven't done in the past will potentially show savings in the future. As a school committee member, the first thing that I think about if the override does not pass is supporting our superintendent. So I always think of the role of the superintendent in the district as the one who sets the morale and sets the culture. And so I think as a school committee, it would really be a time where we have to get behind that superintendent and make sure that she is supported so that she can be the face every day for her staff and for the students to keep that morale up.
Thank you for that. So my next question to each of you, and each of you have different perspective about like different background, right? You have been a student here and you are in the system and you are interested as a parent and of your kids. So what are the few inefficiencies that you are seeing that you want to change or improve upon, or 2 or 3 major changes you want to bring if you are selected?
Sure. So it's interesting. I've had a hard time answering this question because I feel like I want to call upon the things that we are doing. And I forget that now as a candidate, I can speak to some of my own things. So there are some things. So last fall at town meeting, I actually called out the fact that we bring in at this point a small amount of Medicaid from the schools. And right now it's being transferred to town stabilization funds. That money is coming because of the work that our nursing staff and our PTs and OTs are doing with our students. And I also don't think that we are bringing in, I think we could bring in much more Medicaid if we create a system in which it is easy for those providers in our schools to be logging that time. I think we could bring in enough, for 1 or 2 more FTEs in that. So that is something that I've started and I would like to pursue. As Angus said, we will not have the ARPA funds. We have McLean here, which is a teaching hospital in our town. We have done a little bit of work with them through a wonderful partnership that we have with Belmont Wellness Coalition, but talks with them around, as a teaching hospital, do they have interns? Do they have people who are trying to get their degrees, right? Who would actually be able to do some work in our schools with our students as a way, for instance, they don't pay pilot payments, but maybe they would like to contribute some of that, as many of the teaching hospitals in Boston do, to our students to help offset some of the costs there that we have. We've already started to make changes in terms of how our administrative contracts are being written. So in the past, they've been carrying a lot of vacation time when an administrator leaves. That then results in a lot of liability for the district. So the current school committee did not do that with the current superintendent, and she is continuing to not do that. So I do think that we've been looking to reduce some of that potential future liability already.
I'd point out 4 opportunities. I think one is that the district has a number of employees who are part-time, but also receive full-time benefits. And so there aren't always the possibility to combine those into a full-time position, but I think there may be some opportunities to do so. The second is that we are paying on the back end through special education costs, particularly out-of-district costs and placements, a failure to invest on the front end in our early intervention services, particularly in literacy. And so it may not fit in a traditional sense of an efficiency, but I really think we need to see it that way in the macro sense that by investing on the early side, I think we'll realize longer term savings. The third is that, and this is an area that I hope to bring some expertise towards, is applying for state and federal grants. There are opportunities for us to access funds to innovate, to move in new directions, to expand energy efficiencies. And I think we can tap into those, and we just haven't had the capacity to do so. And the fourth is that, frankly, I think it's inefficient that we don't tap the amazing resources of our residents and parents and town members. We have an opportunity to take advantage of the volunteerism and amazing talents of all of our community members. And that can be something as concrete as having a after-school tutoring program. That can be something about taking advantage of more opportunities for internships or for organizing types of learning activities outside of school that are more embedded in practice and applying that knowledge. So I think those are ways in which we can improve the efficiency kind of broadly construed.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of good things that have already been said, and I definitely would love to focus in a little bit on some of the special education angle here, because that's an area where we have a lot of work to do. Streamlining that experience for students and families is going to be a crucial step in making sure that we can provide those services in an efficient and effective way. And that comes from the front end, making sure our base level supports are effective. It also comes when we have a student who is considering an out-of-district placement or who has been moved relatively long-term to a non-general education program within our district. And making sure that we are communicating effectively with those students, with those parents, keeping them involved and included in our community. I think communication broadly is also an area where the school district needs to do better. We have thousands of people whose day-to-day lives are deeply affected by decisions that are made at the school committee level, at the administration level, and in each classroom. And making sure that there is an overarching strategy to those communications, that there is conversation between different stakeholders and different administration levels that goes into how we communicate with our families, with our students, is going to streamline the entire system of running a school district so that people have more trust, have more buy-in towards the programs we're putting forward, and feel more supported.
Thank you. We will take questions from audience or online or.
Anyone else here?
Anyone in the audience want to ask a question first?
I can ask a question if that's
Okay.
I do have a question, and that is, so we've talked about investing in special education, and I was just wondering if you have more developed ideas about how that would take place, like how would we build our in-district special education with limited resources? Or how would we start going about doing that? I'm just wondering about that.
Yeah, so I think that the key to building effective in-district programs, especially at the higher levels, because there's the base level supports, the tier 1 supports that are really for the students who are only just falling behind in their general education programs. But then we have, students with more intense needs at different levels. And the real challenge is going to be identifying larger cohorts of students with very similar needs so that we can meet their needs at scale and really, enjoy the full opportunity to save on those costs, because we can bring a lot of students into a similar program and build that program effectively. Now, a lot of the data that we're going to use to do that is data that the district has that is not publicly available for privacy reasons, and that makes sense. But, you know, really making sure we are digging into that opportunity and looking for those cohorts, making sure that that is the direction that the administration is looking at and is interested in, I think will be effective in finding efficient and effective solutions for special education programming within the district. That's where we can make those investments and make them effectively.
Julie, can I just ask, is this question about if the override does not pass, how we would?
Oh, either way, I guess, because either way, we're gonna have to work on that.
Yeah, no, I think that's an important part. So certainly, right now, in terms of the override budget, we have budgeted for new math and literacy curriculum. So to the point of, you know, starting early, with all of our students, right? All of our students everybody deserves to read. Everybody deserves to be able to do math. So those early interventions, as well as we have budgeted for 4 or 5 special educators to begin a cohort of a special education program. So one that has been identified right now is around language and literacy development. And there's a behavioral one also that has been identified that could be built up at the high school if we were to start to see savings and be able to hire more positions there. So I do think the district has a plan for if the override passes to begin some of this implementation. However, if the override does not pass, you know, we can't just sit and not do anything about it. So some of the things that came out of the audit that we had done that don't cost money are some of just the reconfiguring of positions in the district. So our educators, our special educators need more support. And we don't have somebody, for instance, who is a department leader at the high school. So these are some of the ideas of just reconfiguring that can actually help make it more efficient and allow I think our special educators need more time face-to-face with our students. So they need more of that support. Another thing that I thought was really interesting that came out of that, speaking to, you know, the idea of partnerships or internships, of which we are doing right now with the Work-Based Learning Coalition, is the idea of partnering with people who will come in and do some of that training for special educators. And so the example that was given was a superintendent in Brookline. And so he was really urging us to look at partnerships from organizations that will come in, you know, they do this themselves and they will actually work with our educators to start to improve that. And so I do think that there are some things that are not tied to money that can be done to begin changing the way that we've been doing special education for the better for all of our students.
Really great points that both Angus and Meg have made. I would just add that we have to remember when we're having these conversations, kind of 2 things are true. One is that we spend $21.5 million in the most recent budget towards special education. That's almost 1/3 of our entire district budget. And that we have a moral and legal obligation to serve students to help them be in the most inclusive educational context possible. And navigating that is challenging in a town that has the fiscal constraints that we operate within. And so we're trying to find a way to move forward with an investment from the override to add additional personnel that would allow us to build these programs, both in kind of the therapeutic elements of services that we may provide, or language-based towards addressing dyslexia, or may even be autism spectrum-based. But in addition to improving those services by expanding them, there are ways in which we have to get better operating with what we have. And the audit that Meg referenced identified kind of 9 core recommendations, and not all of them require us to increase our special education budget. They ask and make recommendations to be smarter about how we approach this from a team perspective. And that starts with doing all the things we need to before students would have to enter special education. And then when they're in that, making sure that we're communicating across team members, that we have efficient approaches to using data responding to that, and then assessing how that worked for students and involving parents.
Do we have questions?
Yes.
I'll go to the podium.
Sorry.
Yeah. It's just so that the mic can pick you up.
Yes. Hi, my name is Puni Nestin. I am part of a PEN coalition committee. And I also own a business here in Belmont Center, Karma Fine Crafts. I have two questions, if it's possible. One, the first question is, I've been here only 1 year in my business. I have reached out to high school in the past to try to get students who might be interested in internship. And I didn't have very much luck. And there are kids who try to come in and apply. And so I was wondering, one of the opportunities I see for high school students is you have amazing, shops on the Belmont Center. There's so many opportunities to reach out to the, business owners, because I feel like retail space is such an amazing place for children to learn, not only learn about business, but learn about social issue and sustainability and how women or family-owned businesses run and so forth. It's a great opportunity for a lot of young people to really come down and inquire. I don't know how school facilitates that. Other question is, it's really surprising to hear all these budget constraints about school. I feel like Belmont is such an affluent community. I can't imagine other towns and cities, how they address all of this stuff. So I was wondering if you have a newcomer or new, students who have language issues and parents who are really navigating the whole school system. And if there's a language and learning, sort of challenges, how do you address and how do you support those families and students? And I don't know how, I understand that you're addressing a lot of special education. I know I have two children who are not in the school system. And even going through independent school, there was a lot of challenges, even with schools that has a lot of money and still not willing to spend that money and try to put it on a public schools and so forth. And I've experienced very different, understanding of thinking like, oh my God, we live in America. Children, compared to other parts of the world, we would think like, they would get more resources here. And I understand all the nuance that goes on. I was wondering what your thoughts and really providing more, services for people who don't know how to navigate all this stuff, and especially parents who don't speak the language and who are really scared of these, bureaucracies and teachers. And there's so many language, cultural nuance as well. So I was wondering if you guys could address a couple of minutes on that. Thank you so much.
Do we get 4 minutes for the two questions? I'm serious, actually.
I love the question. Actually, why don't we take one at a time?
Yeah, sure.
So first question was about internship, connecting high schooler with business. And what are your thoughts on those?
Yeah.
Sure. So first of all, not every student wants to go to college. So I think that it's an incredible opportunity to be offering students, and we're hearing this a lot because we don't have a lot of vocational, technical opportunities for our students. So thank you for offering internships for our students. I think it's so important for many reasons, like you said. We have been this year through our Economic Development Committee, a work-based alliance internship program through our Ms. Baker, who is actually the Director of Science and Technology in our district, and they have been setting kids up with internships. So that is something, happy to provide you with those contacts. I know they've been successful with about 40 kids so far. They do, I think it's an 8-week internship. And it's a great opportunity for them. And we want all of our students to have those type of opportunities. As school committee chair, I did write actually a letter to the editor in support of an article that came to town meeting around zoning in order to try to increase the opportunity for more business development in town. And the main perspective that I took on that was actually for our students and for all of the opportunities that businesses offer to our students in terms of their ability to work and intern in them. But also we have a lack of spaces for our students to just hang out in Belmont. And so if there are businesses that would like to come to Belmont that, bowling or what have you, that offer kids opportunities to hang out together, I'm very much in support of that.
I can speak a little bit further on that. I think a lot of the issues here do stem back to communication district capacity. In that, if we have a program for serving students with internships and partnering with businesses, and people are reaching out to the schools to offer those internships and not finding the connection, that's not a story that's new to me tonight. I very frequently hear about people who attempt to contact our town or our schools, and they don't get straight to the right office. And because they find someone who has just about zero time on their hands, it can be a real heavy lift to move that conversation to the proper, place to actually see the results that we all want to see, which is more collaboration within our community. I'm glad you brought up the zoning. I think zoning is a real opportunity for the schools to advocate really clearly for what our students need. I think that shows, again, the power of having a school committee and school committee members who are involved in town affairs across the board, just making sure that the many functions of town government are being conducted in a way that does support our students, that does support our families, and that does support, everyone in town, including that key subset. I'd also love to talk about, the zoning for walkability. I think that's a big area, and I know we're getting off topic a little bit here, but I think when we look at the zoning reforms that we've brought in and that we're still working on, I think making sure that students can get around this town without a car safely, on a bike, on foot, with their friends, is a real opportunity.
One of the graduation requirements we have is for students to participate in community service. And I think there's a real asset in that it allows them to get out into the real world and experience what it's like to serve and to work and collaborate. And opportunities such as internships, I think, create an opportunity to merge that type of service with real world on the job experience. Some of the challenges are that the high school used to have a full-time coordinator, and that's no longer the case. And so just that facilitation has had to be more kind of entrepreneurial. So it's not surprising to hear that it's been hard to tap into getting enough interest in these type of opportunities. And that's an inefficiency, is when we have opportunities, and I would argue we likely have very real interest among our students, and we're not able to connect them. We really need to make sure that we are able to provide the types of kind of non-core classroom instruction supports to our students to make sure that they're ready for college and career after they graduate, because it's that real world experience that's going to help them navigate when they leave the home and when they no longer have the structure of a more kind of traditional classroom setting. And so thank you for offering that opportunity and for investing in our town. That's just phenomenal. I'm happy to pivot to the second question, if that makes sense. I'm really glad you asked about how we as a district are communicating with and supporting our families who are new to Belmont, new to the United States, maybe English language learners. In the district, we have 10% of our students that are English language learners, and that's a meaningful portion of our students. And even more importantly, I would argue, we have 30% of our students who speak a second language as their primary language, but many of whom are bilingual, they're often trilingual. And that's such an asset. That's such a rich opportunity for us to take advantage of. And we have English as a second language kind of support system that we help students to transition into, fully English instruction. But we can do a lot more along several lines. And I think those involve taking advantage of the community assets and resources we have, even the students themselves who are multilingual, to support their peers during that transition, to make sure that our PTA and PTOs are inclusive of all of our parents and residents, and making sure that language isn't a barrier and that they have someone at the meetings who can translate, and making sure that the district is reaching out in a way that is both in terms of language access, but also in terms of just recognizing what are the key issues that different members of our community are facing. And so I'm excited about better serving and kind of honoring the rich linguistic and cultural diversity that our students bring to the district.
I don't remember who's next. It's up to you.
I mean, we kind of just switched directions, so I can go. Yeah, no, I think Matt said a lot of important things there around how we communicate and integrate families who, either have a student who speaks another language or is not well equipped for English instruction right off the bat when they come to the district. And I think the one thing I'd really like to add is that this is an area where there is a state level push to make sure that there's access to these resources for families primarily, how government communication works in a variety of languages. And it's something that I think Belmont could be a good candidate for grants in. I think when we talk about that kind of funding and that kind of opportunity, that's somewhere where this town really, needs to be looking. We have a huge portion of our student body and of our town as a whole that at least is not always comfortable with English, and in many cases struggles to read the complex materials. And we use a lot of funny words when we talk about town government and services within the schools. So it can be difficult. It can be difficult for native English speakers to understand what's going on. So doing effective communication and then making sure that communication is accessible to people, no matter what their linguistic background is going to be crucial. And I think it's an opportunity for us to take advantage of some resources that aren't, general fund.
So I will say, as a school committee member, maybe John could back me up on this, that my favorite presentation of the year actually comes from Miss Rinder, who is our EL director. And so I would say that we have been very successful in terms of the programming that we do have for students who are coming who speak a different home language and need to learn English. Actually, one of the top in the state. I think that it would be a mistake if we didn't continue to invest in that program so that when students come, we are, hitting them with what they need very early on. I think otherwise that could become a situation, as we were talking about earlier with special education, that if you don't provide services and early interventions right away, then you're not providing students what they need in order to be able to thrive in an English-speaking environment. As a school committee member, when we went out to search for a new superintendent last year, we convened a search committee in which we really tried to have representation of our student body on that search committee. And actually, Michael Gao was on that search committee. And when we were putting out materials for getting feedback from community members, we recognized that we really needed to have some of that material translated for people. And Michael helped with the one for Chinese, and we had another member of volunteer help with one for Spanish, but it was not easy for us to do internally as a district. We didn't have a very accessible translation service. So when we hired our superintendent, that was one of the things that she first brought to my attention was that we have to celebrate the diversity of languages that we have and cultures in our district. And if you look at our website, that's not reflected there at all. And so one of the things we talked about was not just having easier translational services and abilities for people to translate, but we should actually have some already translated material on our website to represent some of the languages that are represented here in our district. And so in terms of trying to create a more welcoming environment for families and parents, I am very hopeful that with a new website coming out soon, that that will be one of the things. And so I thank the members of the community who brought that to our attention last year as part of the superintendent search.
Do we have any online
We
questions?
don't have any online questions yet. If anybody online would like to ask a question, please just raise your hand. I can unmute you.
Sure.
Hello, my name is Ketan. So usually what happens is people move to nice towns, for better school, and they're willing to pay taxes and all that. But once they settle in the town, then they get busy with their lives and they never, are involved in any decision making in the town. So as you can see here, right, we have like 25,000-30,000 population, but very few residents here, right, involved in any of the activities. So what would be your recommendation about the government resident partnership, being involved more in the decision making or any of the town activities?
Who wants to start?
I think when we talk about that, again, it comes back to accessibility of leaders. I think we need to make sure that students and families have accessible informal access to our leaders in town. And, it is relatively simple to write out an email and send it off to your elected official, but that's not the kind of communication that you should be doing in a town style government that's on the scale of Belmont, when, they might live just a couple of blocks from you. So I think that's why it's so important to have town leaders and school leaders who are present and visible at events in town, from sports games to, the performances that we have, our concerts, our musical theater, all of these great things that are done in town, making sure that we have our leaders, be it, the district administrative staff or elected officials, present in those spaces, visible in those spaces, and just, wandering around. I've been on town meeting for a year. Now, we have 288 town meeting members, but, my face ended up in a few extra places. And I got stopped on a bus once so that someone could ask me about renovations in their home. And we had a great conversation about how things move through the planning department and the permitting process. But, that's the kind of contact that a lot of families and students have time for when they're somewhere because of something else. And they just run into one of their leaders, one of their people who represents them in town. And I think that's one of the key areas where we need to really hone in on communication, is having those informal opportunities and making sure that our leaders are visible and accessible in those places.
I think we'll always have to try to do better at that. I remember when I ran the first time for school committee, that was one of the big transparency and communication, and I do think we've made some improvements. So we have tried to leverage, for instance, our PTAs and our other volunteer groups who do so much for our schools, because we do take advantage of many community members who volunteer in our schools. This year, for instance, we actually assigned liaisons to the PTOs. So back in the day, I learned the PTAs would actually have somebody who would come to all school committee meetings and then report back to them, and that's how they would disseminate the information. I consider it a privilege that I have time to be able to make time for the position that I have, and not everybody has that, right? And so this year we started trying to go to them. So we, assigned school committee members as liaisons to our PTAs and PTOs to start trying to push more information out through them. But you can always do better. I mean, one of the things about being a school committee member is that policy is so critical to the district, right down to what happens in our students' daily lives every day. And we have been updating our policies this year. We rarely get feedback from the community on those, even though we do readings at our subcommittees and we do readings at the full committee. And so I just started thinking the other day, we really should be pushing those out to our PTAs and asking them to get feedback from from members of the school district and bringing that back to the school committee. So I think we can always do better. I think that it is our role to try to do better. So earlier about that in terms of communication to the district, I mean, part of the role of the school committee is to identify, areas where community members aren't able to get what they need to the district administration, whether that's a principal or a superintendent, and facilitate that. So that's part of the role. And I do think that we can always try to do a better job. And I'm always open to ideas from community members as well.
Last night, I attended one of the superintendent's community feedback and participation events for developing the 3-year strategic plan and vision and mission for the district. And I think that process is a good example of how we are leaning into being a more inclusive district by building a group of members that are diverse both in their background characteristics, but also their roles in our community, whether they're parents or business owners or involved in the district in a teaching position or administrative position or another more service-oriented position. And so it's that example of structuring a committee that's specifically tasked to achieve something, not just kind of a vague, broad. I think people are more likely to get involved when they know that what they're doing has impact and agency. And so we need to also then follow through on honoring that advice and information. I think kind of building on what Meg said about community feedback, the more that we as a district can formalize the ways in which we solicit and collect feedback, the better. And that, I think, means conducting, which a lot of districts do, a parent survey and asking, how are you experiencing our schools? Tell us about what's working and what's not working. And then pivoting to specific kind of our goals. We've aimed to, improve our instruction in early literacy, and then assessing that using data, but also community voice and saying, is this working for you? And pushing that out to the PTAs and PTOs is an effective way to do that.
Other questions?
I was going to ask one more question.
Sure.
Absolutely.
I was just wondering, what is the percentage of diversity in school committee? I just want to know how does it reflect the residents? So I'm really new to this, so I was just wondering, that might make a difference in terms of how inclusive our community is, what efforts the city government is making in terms of really bringing a diverse and different experiences and different, knowledge on this issues. So I would love to know that.
And I would like to add just one other point here, because I have seen both my kids go through the school system and it changes, dynamics changes with elementary to middle school to high school, right? And seeing diversity in school stuff, like just having one teacher who was Indian made huge difference on them. Like they could identify, they really were more interested. And so just that one teacher made that much difference. I wish there is more diversity in all aspects of our school system, right? And I know it's not an easy problem to fix, because there's pipeline problem and motivation problem and all sort of things, but it's just adding to that I've seen that firsthand, and I wish there is more. But yeah, any thoughts how you can improve that, or how can you look at that?
Well, I'll answer the question first. We don't have much diversity on the school committee. So currently we have,
John.
I was trying to think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Jamal is
And
Middle
Jamal
Eastern.
is Middle Eastern, and he is not running again. Gender this year has been 3 women and 3 men. I'm actually the only woman running for elected office this time in terms of moderator, select board, and school committee. So not a lot of diversity in terms of who runs for positions in town. Yeah. That question, so some of my work right now actually is throughout the state of Connecticut, and it is looking at what are the factors in districts that actually help retain math and science teachers. And so really, and notice I said retain, not like why do people leave? So it's really looking from an asset-based framework, really like at the ecology of a district in terms of why teachers of minority status in a typical district choose to stay, and identifying that. And I think that we are at that point now where all school districts need to be thinking more about that. And we have last year set the goal to diversify our staff and our administration. The school committee will be getting an update on that from our DEI director next month, actually, in terms of how that's gone. But it is certainly a goal. Again, that was another position that even though the override failed the last time, we did choose to hire a DEI director, and that has been something that she has been certainly focused on and trying to work on here.
One only has to look at the pictures on the wall here to know that we have work to do to be a more inclusive and diverse community, especially in our community leadership. And so I think this goes back to this question of how do you create bridges and open access to open opportunities and invite people in. And that starts with building a sense of belonging, both in classrooms, but also in community spaces, to say your perspective is valued. We want to move in the direction of making sure that we honor and celebrate the diverse cultural, linguistic, racial, and ethnic backgrounds that we have represented in our community. And, our community is growing and changing, and we may not see that kind of on a day-to-day scope, but over time, I think we have that opportunity, particularly in the ways in which our educators and other staff in schools, we know the power that an individual teacher can have on shaping a student's life. I think back to my own educational career and path, and those individual, I think about Miss Thomas in 10th grade English and how she pushed me to be a better student and helped me navigate, difficult times outside of the classroom. And it's particularly the case that happens when you share common backgrounds and lived experiences. And we have a unique opportunity because we are in one of the most richly dense areas for teacher education and just education in general. And so more proactive recruitment. And as Meg pointed out, it's not just enough to recruit teachers of color. We need to make sure that the working conditions that they work in are welcoming, inviting, and they can be successful, so they stay.
Yeah, I think the retention focused model of recruiting or of building out that diverse force of educators is a great plan, and it's moving in a good direction. I'm optimistic about where we can go with that. I would note that there's a reason that we like to see diversity in our leadership and in our classrooms beyond just it's nice to see a lot of people reflected. It's also nice to have a lot of perspectives reflected. And, that's one of the things that brought me into this race, was that I didn't see the perspective of someone who'd been in classrooms dealing with a pandemic or social media or the new challenge of generative AI. And, there's only one person up here who's running to change that on the school committee. And I also frankly see an issue. I don't believe there's a single LGBTQ plus elected official townwide in Belmont. And, that's something that I find, troubling. And when I went through my time in Belmont Public Schools as a gay student, I had a lot of friends who were part of a community that is really struggling in our schools, especially if you look at the mental health data. It can be terrifying, frankly. So I think we have work to do on diversity at the leadership level, at the educator level, and at the protecting students who have those very backgrounds and identities.
I'm sorry that was your experience, and thank you for sharing.
I just want to comment as I was a member of the Diversity Task Force, and also I'm now co-chair of the DEI Implementation Committee. And so as for the numbers, there are almost 30% Asian students in the school district. About and then as far as the staff, it was about like 96% white. So there's a big mismatch there.
Yeah, that's.
Yes. So in the population at large, just including the residents and school, it's closer to like 17% Asian. So anyway, so just underlining what you all are saying, that it's important to try to bring the numbers closer together. Anybody
Okay.
online want to say anything?
No one online want to raise their hand so far. All right, I'll ask the question that has to be asked. We are coming up to a union negotiation year. Our contract is expiring in 2025. So before we expire, we can start having the conversation. As we sing in Newton, once they reach an impasse to the point where you get to a strike, it is not just the representation talking to the school committee anymore. It is actually community talking with each other, involving the state. It's neighbors against neighbors in a way. How can you contribute to the negotiation and the conversation, and not just, at the negotiation table, but also, everything else that's related to a union negotiation? Anyone?
It's a big
First,
question.
last time.
I'm happy to start. Thank you for asking that question, Jung. The school committee has kind of three big roles: hiring and supervising, evaluating the superintendent, setting policy, and overseeing the budget, and negotiating with the union. And that is going to be a key feature of how we think about many of the things we've talked about. We need to find a way to both invest in our educators and our schools, but operate within the fiscal constraints that our town has. And we need to do that in a way that creates the types of opportunities for the leadership to innovate, to address questions around improving special education, around providing more early intervention. And so that's one of the most critical ways in which the school committee actually operationalizes some of the policy opportunities going forward. One thing that I bring as a candidate is someone who, in fact, this semester, I'm teaching a class on the economics of education, and we spend a week talking about teacher unions and collective bargaining. I have read dozens of collective bargaining agreements across districts in this country. I know what are in them in detail, and I also bring the economic background to be able to model the different types of financial implications of the ways in which we design the step and salary schedule for our teachers. And I am committed to bringing an approach that is around finding common ground, around shared values. And I think if we start there, as someone who said, I've been in a union as a public school teacher, I understand that perspective. Let's find a way to work together.
So I can speak briefly. I think one of the most important parts of a negotiation is an understanding of the facts, and especially when that negotiation turns from a committee and a bargaining team sitting down at a table and working through the issues to a very public fight, which is what we see when these districts near or experience a strike. That is not what I think anyone frankly wants for Belmont. I certainly don't want to see a strike. I think one of the most important jobs of the school committee is to keep our students in the classroom, learning. You know, that is our obligation. That is our constitutional obligation. And, you know, the way in which we go about handling that is going to rely on how effectively we can communicate, not just with the educators and the Educators Association, but also with the community. We need to make sure that accurate information about the conversations that are being had at the table, the you know, the issues that are being debated, the numbers behind them are filtering out to the community in a way that is digestible and, you know, makes sense, because that is how we make sure that there is pressure on all parties to reach a deal. You know, the community is our best friend in that kind of conversation. And so making sure that we can handle negotiations in a way that is transparent, that is clear about the ramifications of a contract, will be our most important asset. And we need to make sure, frankly, that we have a contract that allows us to run the district in a way that reflects our values as a community and reflects the resources that we have as a community.
So I think we learned a lot from the last negotiations. One of those things is certainly planning, sitting down and thinking about what is best for our students. Remember, the contract is not just about the money. The contract is a lot of language. It really dictates what the administration has oversight of on a daily basis. So I get a lot of emails right now about, can you change start times, right? Well, that has to be negotiated. A school day is defined in those contracts. So that involves the school committee and the superintendent really coming together, listening to what they're hearing from the community, from parents, and from the staff, and coming to a shared vision around that. I think that going into them with the idea that you can reach a common ground is really important to reach it that way. I think we have new legal counsel who also brings that vision to it, which would be helpful. Last time we did send out more than one communication to the community that did actually have the facts of what we were offering and what was being countered. I do think that was effective, and I think that doing that earlier rather than later, so that it doesn't seem like you're being defensive, but instead you're actually just trying to keep the community abreast of what's going on, is really important, especially nowadays. More people are paying attention to that, and it's your children, and it, you know, so that is what we are. We are there to make sure that we are negotiating on the best interest of the children, and like Angus said, to keep them in the schools. I am hopeful. I feel like the conversations, so we are always negotiating. We are signing MOAs. I signed one today. So there's always negotiations going on at different levels in the district. I do feel like that this year with new leadership, there's been a more collaborative, maybe if that's what you want to call it, but at least a vibe in which people are coming to consensus, coming to things that are best for students and best for teachers in a bit of an easier way.
I have another question. So Angus brought up mental health, and there has been evidence of like a real surge in mental health issues in our adolescents, our kids, and that has been shown in the youth behavior risk survey as well, particularly for marginalized communities, for minority, and particularly for the LGBTQ population. So I was wondering, sort of within the constraints of our budget, with or without the override, how can our schools address these issues?
I would certainly like to just call out and thank the Belmont Wellness Coalition. So that is a wonderful partnership that we have currently and who have been doing more and more work in our schools. They are also the ones that bring that data to us and follow up with us when they have started an initiative in terms of the success of that. So building on that, like I said earlier, I do think that it is on us to begin to look at additional partnerships because we need that additional support, especially with ARPA funds rolling off. So last year, I went to the select board and asked them to provide us with additional ARPA funds really in order to maintain the staffing that we had. And we were not given enough to maintain that over 2 years. We were given enough to maintain half of that over 2 years. So we've already had to make some difficult decisions. And in that staffing are a lot of our social workers and people who are providing those supports for our students right now. I also see a culture change. So in terms of new leadership, we have new principals coming in who are very focused on this, who are working with students and who are working with parents. So this is one of the great things about our school advisory councils that we have at every school that engage parents with the principal. They set goals for that. And I know right now at the middle school, this is one of them. And so they are looking at how they can create a culture and different initiatives because they are very aware that this is impacting our students' health and wellness and their academic achievement.
Next.
I've known about the mental health challenges that our schools are facing since I experienced the mental health challenges that our school has been facing, throughout my entire time in Belmont's public schools. There were always instances where I had people close to me who were in really difficult situations and weren't receiving the support that they needed. And that has a deep and dangerous impact on the ability of any student to, fulfill their academic potential to the degree that they really should. The support system for mental health is really quite complex. You can have the social workers and the mental health professionals, but it is, as Meg mentioned, about building cultures that are effective at providing support, providing community, providing, fulfillment for our students throughout every aspect of their academic and non-academic lives. I think it's going to be really devastating to student mental health if we're forced to make cuts like the extracurricular programs that are slated to go over the next 2 years if the override is to fail. That is a huge source of community, sports, performing arts for our students. And when you lose community, that can put our students in a very rough place. That does not build effective classrooms, that does not build effective academic experiences. But we, in my view, have a lot of opportunities to grow those partnerships and to also focus on growing a culture where students feel like they are able to take on a workload that's appropriate, be it from extracurriculars to AP and higher level curriculum. We need students who are in a place where they are comfortable with what they can handle and are fulfilling that.
As a dad to 2 young kids, I think about this a lot. I want for my children an academic experience that is joyful, that is challenging, that is uplifting. And so that starts with how we define what our mission and vision and values are as a district. And we're doing that right now to kind of renew how we define where we want to go. And recognizing that the data tell us from the Youth Risk Survey that levels of anxiety, depression, and even suicidal thoughts are shockingly and disturbingly high. And so these are the challenges that we face and not thinking, how is this a individual one-off thing that we have to address, and instead saying, what are we doing as a district that creates a culture where every individual student has an adult in the building who knows their name, knows how they're doing, and that they have that caring and trusting relationship that they can go to them and say, I need some help. I'm not in a good place. And there are ways to do that more formally, particularly in the middle and high school setting where you transition across classes more frequently and you may be in larger classes. And so you don't know someone, you don't have the time exposure. You can do relationship mapping exercises as a staff to figure out, is this student, who's their connection? Do we have that student on our radar? And I think that when we center that, we improve the academic outcomes of our students at the same time, which is also kind of at the core of what we're trying to do. And we have to be able to see that those are deeply connected.
Can I respond to one word that you said? And that is shockingly. If you go through our schools, if you eat in our cafeterias, if you attend your extracurriculars with other students, and then you look at the survey data that we have, you are not shocked. You might be appalled, you might be troubled, upset, all of these things, you are not shocked. Because it is painfully clear when you go through our schools how bad this issue has gotten. That's all.
I'll ask another question. And I haven't seen this question asked through your joint events in the past month. And there was a question that was asked during my debate last year that I actually thought was really helpful in providing a little bit of levity as well as community. Ultimately, we are going to be a school committee of 6, and we're going to be working as a team together. So would you say something nice about your fellow candidate? Since you will, if you are elected, you will be working with at least one of the other person.
I'm happy to start. I think I was the last person to decide that they were going to run for school committee. This is the first time I've run for an elected position. I had a lot to learn. I have invested my entire life in improving schools, but navigating local politics is a learning curve, and not something I knew a lot about. And Angus knocked on my door early on in the campaign, and I was still collecting signatures just to get my name on the ballot. And Angus kindly offered to sign my papers so that I could put my name on the ballot. And once my name was on the ballot, Meg was the first person to reach out to me to say, hey, so glad that you're stepping in to possibly contribute and serve our community. We need volunteers. And, what do you need to know about how this process works? And I had tons of questions because she had this rich experience of having been on the committee. And that's just 2 examples of, honestly, the over 100 conversations I've had with residents and members of the warrant committee and the select board and town meeting and the whole host of different community organizations, Black and Brown and Belmont and Human Rights Coalition, and who have just been so giving of their time to help share the rich and important history of our town and how we work collaboratively to get things done. So thank you both.
You're welcome.
I'll say, I'll start with Meg. I think you've been a very effective chair over the last couple of years, and that is not an easy task when you have a committee of 6 people, especially especially when that's a well-built committee of six people with differing backgrounds and perspectives. And getting that to be a committee that can act, that can find 4 votes for the same thing and move forward. And so often 5, 6 votes for the same thing, which is really a powerful sight for our district and for our community. So I really see that as effective work and important work. Matt, I hate to admit it, but there have been moments where I've gone through your history of papers and looked through some of your research to help my understanding of issues and work that we need to do in Belmont. Because, again, I come from a background of moving policies forward through the difficult and complex systems of government. And I don't pretend to be the #1 expert up here on education policy, but there's some really insightful data and great communication. I'm also grateful to the educators in Belmont Public Schools for teaching me how to read academic papers, because it is often a lot of language that I'm a little bit new to.
Yeah,
but
academics have a lot of work to do to translate more effectively.
Yes, but I see that work as being a body that I know I'll draw on if I'm on the committee, no matter what the result of this election is. And yeah, so I appreciate that.
So I have to admit that I do think right now that it is critical to have some consistency on the school committee. Our school committee has been turning over a lot. And I think that in order to get things done, that it's important to have consistency. But that being said, I did not want to have to campaign for sure. So, but you know what, as Jung was saying, I mean, I did it 3 years ago and you learn a lot and it brings you back out into the community. And so I'm actually really thankful that that both of you have stepped up and chosen to run. And it's not just anybody who has stepped up and chosen to run. So I think that Angus does bring, a different perspective to offer to the school committee. And is a great role model for all of us adults, not just young people. But I think that a lot of us don't think that younger people are that involved anymore, right? And want to be as engaged. And so I think that you have, for this entire community, caused us to really necessitate a mind shift change about how we may look at age. And so I appreciate you for pushing me in that way. And I think that you've done that for many people as well. And I would say that I guess the word that for me every time Matt speaks is just very genuine. And again, that's something that I feel like I learned from, and that's a really important thing for everybody in town to take away who wants to run for an office, is that you're running, in our case, because we care about students. Like that is why we're here, is because of students. And, or if you're running for office because, really of the town, and this all is a web anyway, but you don't need to be somebody that you're not. And you can only offer what you can offer. And I keep running out of time. But every time you speak, you remind me of that. Like, you are here to offer what you have, and that's what you're putting out there. So good question, John.
Thank you. So thank you, everyone. You want to have any other closing? Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Thank you, everyone.
It's like a nice
questions.
Yeah, that's
We can I know.
quite a high.
Yeah. We can go with closing remarks.
Time to drag you guys through the mud. In all seriousness, it is an honor every time I get to come to an event with my fellow candidates, or just to talk about the issues facing our school committee. I've knocked on thousands of doors over the course of this campaign, had a lot of really interesting conversations over the phone, over email, and in person with people in this community who represent areas of town that I haven't had the opportunity to interact with. But I really bring it back to the fact that we need committee that represents the town also has a full understanding of what goes on in our district. And that includes the grounded perspective of the issues facing our classrooms, the modern issues, things like AI, social media, and, a small global pandemic that are still impacting our students and impacting our classrooms. And that, frankly, we just don't have a school committee member who's been in those rooms full time and who's seen some of those impacts. I'm also running to make sure that we can get the job done. I come from a background of advocacy, of moving policy through the system. And if you interact with Belmont government very often, you know how tough that system can be sometimes. But so often, the most important thing is having someone who's going to show up every day and keep pushing and keep moving things along. And, that requires some energy, that requires some time, and that requires a background in that area. And that's what I want to bring to the school committee. So I humbly ask for one of your 2 votes on April 2nd.
I will begin. I guess I do just want to, put out there that, so this school committee has actually been moving over 100 policies forward in the last few months. In fact, there will be 2 on the first meeting in April. So we have been working really hard to move policy through, and I think that we've been doing it at a very quick pace, actually. And I do think that this election has the opportunity to determine the direction for Belmont Public Schools for the next 3 or 4 more years. As Matt has mentioned, we are going through a strategic planning process right now. We just hired a new district leader, and we need to see that through. I think it's really important to have a committee that stands behind the administration and that knows the job of a school committee and is focused on implementing the strategic plan in the best interest of all of our students. I have worked tirelessly to be a strong advocate for our students. I am pleased to have been able to bring in much needed one-time funds and to serve students throughout the district. I ensured that we completed a full search for superintendent during an unprecedented year for districts throughout the state seeking to hire superintendents. It was something that I strongly advocated for. And I feel that now we need to work together to nurture a district that serves all of our students and provides a range of opportunities for them to discover who they are, be challenged, and find joy in learning. I'm a parent of 2 Belmont Public School students, an educational professional, and I'm an experienced member of the school committee. I know what the job is, and I do hold myself to the highest standards in doing it. And that is why I'm asking for your vote on April 2nd.
I've got my prepared stump speech, but I'm going to put that down and just build on what I think has just been a really wonderful conversation and the 2 comments that my colleagues here mentioned about who I am as a person. If you are looking for someone who spends his time, days and nights and sometimes weekends, thinking about how do we attract and recruit and select and support and retain excellent educators. If you are looking for someone who thinks deeply about the ways we can support students in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic through individualized instruction, tutoring, and mentoring. If you're looking for someone who's thinking critically about the ways in which we use school time, whether that's start time or the length of the day or the length of the school year or the amount of time dedicated to professional development. If you're looking for someone who wants to figure out ways to creatively provide supports to teachers through peer observation and feedback cycles. If you're looking for someone who wants to dig into data and create a learning organization as a district that sets goals that are concrete, that is audacious and aspires to meet them, measures how we do, and reacts and responds in an improvement learning cycle, I am your candidate. And if you want someone who will tell you what they think, even when that might not be something that you agree with, who is transparent, who's honest, will admit when I don't know the answer and when I'm conflicted about the answer and it's difficult for me to arrive at a solution because I see both sides of the issues, then I am your candidate. I don't have all the answers, but I'm committed to listening and working together as a community to collaborate towards building towards a better future for our schools. I would be honored to have one of your 2 votes for school committee. Thank you.
Thanks to all of you. Really appreciate your coming. So, and wish that we could, vote you all in. So.
Thank you, everyone.
All right.